how do we bring the joy back to work? Because the world is very serious. Our personal lives are very hard sometimes. Work doesn't also have to add to that. Let's find the joy in that. The most successful executive C suite leaders are going to be the ones that can actually be adaptable and jump in and out. Like, what's the job description you have now? What's the job description you're looking for? You might not be everybody's cup of tea. You might be ayahuasca.
That's it. Okay, we're recording. Nithya, thank you so much for stopping by today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Victor.
I think you're the first person to actually be repping company swag. So before we even go in and ask you about T1 and what you do there, we can see it on your t-shirt. And I think congrats is in order because you guys just cleaned up at an award show, if I've got it correct.
Yeah, we had a really, really, I guess, privileged and rare occurrence happen. We won Agency of the Year at the Sponsorship Marketing Association in the US. So we accepted that award in Denver a couple of weeks ago. And then we also accepted very recently the Sponsorship Marketing Council of Canada's Agency of the Year award as well. So north and south of the border.
Well, congrats to that. I imagine that's just because T1's been around for quite a bit. That's just two more pieces of hardware in what I guess is a very expansive trophy case.
We, traditionally haven't applied for a lot of awards. We've kind of been the humble, keep our heads down, make friends with everybody, and just kind of do. And this year we thought, let's throw our hats in the ring and see how we do. And to be recognized by our peers was just really meaningful and really special.
Okay, so let's go into what you do at T1. We're going to start at the beginning. So you're the president and chief strategy officer at T1. So you've already touched on what T1 does just by virtue of the awards you were winning at the sponsorship and marketing awards, but go into a little bit more depth as to what T1 is and what your role there entails.
Yeah, absolutely. So T1 is a full stack sponsorship and experiences agency. So we borrowed from web developer language when we thought about full stack, right? Because we really wanted to represent that we were end to end in this experience, all the way from what should your sponsorship strategy be? How do you evaluate deals or your assets? How do you negotiate those deals to activating those sponsorship in a really impactful and meaningful way. And so when we activate, that's everything from XM builds or experiential marketing builds. That could be, an integrated PR influencer social media campaign. We're in a lot of interagency teams as well. So it's that end to end process. And my role as president and chief strategy officer is two pronged. So I'm responsible for the business strategy of the agency. So not necessarily looking at the day to day, but I'm looking at what does next week, month, year, 3 years look like? How are we kind of staying ahead of things? How are we causing a bit of friction as well to get to the next level? So that's kind of my role. And then the other hat that I play is also leading our strategy and creative team. So on the day-to-day work with our clients, really how are we elevating that thinking, that ideation, and that creative output as well. So we're not just delivering on those briefs, but pushing those briefs, maybe breaking some of those briefs as well in our kind of corner of the Marcom spectrum.
You should create a little sub portfolio for yourself, the VP of friction, and then get a vanity plate for it and everything.
I know, right? I
Yep.
mean, shit disturber works too, but I like friction.
Okay. I, I I mean, I don't know if you could get shit disturber even if you dropped the vowels on a vanity plate, but VP of friction, I mean, you could.
It can work.
So we're going to come back to this later on, but let's go back to the beginning. So I know you're Toronto born and raised, but you lived elsewhere too. And take us through where you've lived abroad and where you believe your formidable years came from in Canada.
Yeah. So it's so funny that I was born in Toronto, but we left when I was about 7 years old. And we lived in India for about 4 years. But I actually spent my formative years in Edmonton, growing up with really closely with my cousins, with my aunts, and family there. And so I actually rep Edmonton really hard, despite not living there anymore. And after I got an international business degree, I decided to put it to use and lived abroad for a few years. So then I moved to Madrid, Spain. I moved to Hyderabad, India. I moved to London, UK. And when all the visas ran out, I came back to Canada.
When the visas ran out.
I mean, it's a real thing.
And it's
Um,
very true, yes.
Very true. And then, yeah, so when that happened, I moved back to Canada, but I moved to Calgary, which was still in the height of its then cycle of oil boom. So moved there for opportunity. When I felt like I was kind of looking at different opportunities, especially outside of the oil and gas sector, moved to Toronto, and I've been here since the end of 2018.
Okay, so I wanna just go back a number of years. Did you say it was 7 years old you moved to, India?
Yeah.
Was Does a 7-year-old understand that kind of move at that time? Like, did you experience culture shock as well? Because I imagine the 17-year-old version of you would kind of hold her breath and go, "Okay, I'm jumping into something new." But the 7-year-old version of you hears she's moving to India.
You
Anything from that?
know, I've never been asked that question. It's a really great question. I think on one hand, it was a grand adventure, right? We're moving to a different country. Everything is new. You're around new sets of family. You're making new friends. I think the schooling system was a big shock for me. It was something that was a big challenge for me. And I acknowledged that and absorbed that in real time, where our schooling systems, kind of in a Western centric system, are very, I guess, critical thinking based. The ones in India at the time were very memorization based. So, for example, like in English class, like here, traditionally you would do a book report and you'd have to say, what did you learn? Or, what was the central thesis? Or what about this character who was a protagonist, antagonist, etc. They would give you the answers to those questions and you had to answer them verbatim, like in a test setting. So it was a different way.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe the Indian school system has changed since then as well, but at that time, it was something I really struggled with because it was very much my way or the highway, like, it was very rigid in terms of learning, so, it was definitely something that I know that I struggled with, but I think for me, it's been ingrained since I was a kid, like, that idea of adaptability and learning, not in a school setting, but learning kind of the world and getting to go to different places, meet new people, try new things has always been kind of a part of who I am, which is also maybe makes sense as to why I kind of city hopped for 10 years.
Okay, just touching on the
Mhm.
way you were taught in India, did that improve your muscle memory? Like, it sounds like at the beginning it was like, but maybe it was kind of like doing your first push-up. You're like, "I'll never do this again," and then if you keep at it over and over again, you build that muscle. Like, did you find coming away or even right now in your professional life, you can remember things better than your peers simply because you had that kind of training in your education?
Maybe. I was like, is this a therapy podcast right now? Or is
Do you want therapy? Like, I mean, we could totally do it if you want to, but I would imagine if that was like you were doing that over and over and over again, because sometimes that comes up in school where they're like you said, like it's like they just give you a list or a theory and you have to remember it. Like you remember in math class when and this was not that I went very far in math, but like where it was like the first thing I would do when I had an exam was like write down all the formulas that you can remember and just get them on the paper. And then so if you start to get a little bit scattered, at least you don't have to worry about forgetting it and doing the entire question incorrectly because you didn't have the formula.
Yeah. 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 No, as you say that, it's really interesting. I do find my short form memory is quite, I mean, my long term memory as I get older is getting worse, but in a short form, I do find it's quite good. And it's interesting you say that because I do consider it one of my superpowers to be able to like connect the dots. And I think a lot of that comes from short and midterm memory. So maybe that was the origin story to it. I literally had never made those connections. So again, you can send me the therapy bill after.
Consider it complimentary,
Yeah,
literally.
I appreciate
Or
that.
as a sponsorship agency, if you can get companies like Better Health to start sponsoring this podcast, we'll
Oh
do
god, look
something.
at you.
We'll
Just
cut that.
like with the
This is what
flow.
we got to do. So, okay, so let's go and look at your hobbies or interests when you were growing up. Seems
Mhm.
like you were very big into the arts, music. If I got it right, music and dancing.
Yeah. Yeah, really into it. I, started as a like, my parents loved throwing, parties, like, when we were growing up in Toronto, like,
Nice.
my
Okay.
parents, like, always had people over. All the kids would kinda be banshees in the basement running around, but, like, we always had people over, we always had parties, we'd always be, like, having dance parties too, and so it was always something that was part of our growing up, and my dad loved music, so we always had music going, like, we were listening to like, Michael Jackson on cassette tapes and,
Oh, yes.
everything, right? So that's kind of how we grew up. And so that was always ingrained in me in a really big way. So when I was a kid, I did Bharatanatyam, which is Indian classical dancing, like one of the forms, for a couple of years when I was really young. But then started exploring other things as we were growing up. So we did hip hop and Bollywood and Indian folk. And then when I was in university, even I was doing salsa and Brazilian samba. And when I moved back to Canada, I was doing soca and dance hall and like and crumping and just exploring different kind of genres and styles as a way of movement, which was really great. And then in parallel, my cousin and I did Indian classical singing lessons for a number of years, Carnatic music, which is quite unique. My sister and I dabbled in the veena, which is also a traditional Indian instrument. So it's always kind of been there. And then I picked up DJing for a few years in
Okay.
Calgary, and I like to dabble.
D Definitely a Jane of all trades right there, that's for sure. Okay, so something about your childhood or I guess your student life that you and I have in common is it seems like we liked school, but we seem to like the extracurricular stuff more
Absolutely.
than going to class.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
what was it that, gave you that first extracurricular buzz? Like the first time you decided to sign up for something outside of class?
The first times were when I was in school in India because they still did like a drama production. Like I was in Fiddler in the Roof, I think, like in the chorus line, like in grade 4 or 5, maybe. I can't remember. But I think it was a way of just school's rigid. You have like a curriculum, you go to class, it's your 9 to 5 equivalent. And I found the extracurriculars were maybe a way of my brain thinking a different way, of meeting people in a different way, maybe associating some value and accomplishing something in a different facet, not just by a grade. So yeah, I got the bug early. Maybe I'm a busybody, maybe all of the above. Maybe it was a way to exercise like the A type personality in a different way. But yeah, I got really involved in extracurriculars of everything from like organizing volleyball tournaments in high school to being on the debate team to being in Model UN and, just trying my hand at different things. So maybe it was my way of trying out different things.
I always ask my guests what their first job ever was. And
Mhm.
usually it's something like work in retail, QSR, so forth. Yours is babysitting, but I want to throw a caveat in there because this is something that's been coming up a little recent with some of my other guests is they don't just tell me what their first job was, they immediately follow it up with what the end goal was, the monetary end goal. So
Thing.
your first job was babysitting,
Yeah.
but this was to, if I've got this right, you wanted to pay for your junior trip to, your junior high school trip to Europe. So, were you always planning on getting a job and in babysitting, it's like, "That's what I'm gonna do with the income," or did that trip and the fact that you had to pay for a chunk of it out of your own pocket motivate you to get that first job?
I mean, you're really asking me to go through I just talked about my long-term memory and how it wasn't that great. I think
I
I think
mean, no one's gonna fact check you directly on this if you say
I mean,
this,
my
so
mom watches this maybe. But I think it was a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. It was, one of those things where I was goal oriented growing up, but it was also something where I wanted to make sure I was also pulling my weight, contributing to my family, knowing that like it wasn't something that we necessarily could just throw away as income in our family. And so it was my way of pulling my weight, but also earning towards something that I wanted to do in myself. So yeah, it was something where I paid for half of that grade 9 trip to Spain and Portugal.
and then you also started tutoring as well too. I mean, we're gonna go back. You mentioned your long-term memory. Do you remember what subject you were primarily tutoring for?
No, I do not remember what the subjects were. I think it was like I was in high school and the little girl was like in junior high. So I think it was just like all of her subjects, like helping her with their homework
Gotcha.
and tutoring that way, if I can remember that correctly. It was the reason I got my first cell phone though, which is always like,
Oh, do you remember your first cell phone though? Was it pay as you go? Was it a pay as you go cell phone?
yeah,
Or did you
it was, I don't remember
was
what
it
brand it
was it
was.
the Fido-Matic
Or
or
something,
something like that where you had to buy the cards at like 7-Eleven and like top up and
right?
someone would call you and you'd be like, "You're not important enough. I only have like $5 left on this phone." Yeah,
But
I
I
know.
couldn't get the Nokia one, so I was really jealous because it was, like, too expensive, so I had some cheaper version. It was, like, tall and yeah, if you can imagine, yeah.
No, you remember when like $200 was too much for a cell phone? It's just like, oh, $200. And I remember once I had to, in one of my cell phones, I had to replace the battery and I took it to the store and the guy was like, the battery's $90, a new phone's $200. Use your head. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm springing for a new phone. And now there are many computers that you can finance.
Yeah, yep, it's true, accurate,
It's,
accurate.
I just want to close out on retail as well, just because a lot of my guests have done retail. So what, what kind of retail were you working in? And what did you learn about yourself doing retail?
Yeah, so I did clothing retail, through, like, I think it was, I can't remember if it was late high school or if I started in, like, first year university. What I found is that I had issues with authority. So,
Okay.
because if you think about those retail environments, there are people that are managers that are not that much older than you maybe, or like power tripping, it's
Hmm.
kind of a luck of the draw what you got. I do think that it taught me about, your two breaks and your hour lunch, or what those kind of rules and structure looks like, especially in that environment. But I think what it taught me or reinforces that I was good with people. I always knew I was outgoing and extroverted, but the idea of being able to connect with strangers on such a small increment of time, to make them feel good so that they would buy clothing, was an interesting learning, I think, for me, because later, a lot of people start doing sales, maybe if they're in a corporate job, especially as we work in our industry and marketing and media and everything. Sales is a part of that job, and there's a big intimidation factor out of it. I think
Yes.
retail
Yes.
is like the great, common denominator, right? Or it's like lowest denominator. And we're like, if you work in retail, you're doing sales in effect. It's just you're selling a shirt or a pair of jeans. You got to make people feel good and match that need in order to do it. So I feel like it was like a crash course in sales, like in mini micro increments of 29.99, right? But I think it's a big life skill that I've carried with me.
After university, you started working for, do we pronounce it ASEC or do we pronounce like every
We
letter?
Isaac,
ISEC,
like
but
the
it's
guy's name. Yeah.
Isaac, ISAAC, but this one is
Yeah.
AIESEC.
Yeah.
And you jump into a senior role, but this role isn't in Canada. This role is at this point, this is when you moved to Spain?
Yeah, so I was really involved with ISIC throughout my university experience. So for all 4 years, the way that the organization structured is that there's a global kind of body or team. Each country that participates, it's in over 110 countries, has a national body, and then there are university chapters throughout all of these countries. So I was really involved with the University of Alberta chapter in Edmonton, which was great. We, traveled the country to go to conferences. We met all of our counterparts in different cities. Some of them were still very good friends of mine. Like 20 years later, I, in fact, went to one of their weddings just a couple of weeks ago in Vancouver
Oh,
because we
nice.
all kind of, stayed in touch. It was this like university camaraderie that we had, but it spanned the country and sometimes globally as well. So yeah, I got a lot of opportunities in like leadership development, running teams, running events, as we were kind of running this organization at a local level, which was focused on global internships. So we were, getting companies and organizations in Edmonton to sign up for interns, and then we were working with the platform to get other ISICers from different countries to come fill those internships. So it was this grand experience or experiment rather in sales, in sponsorship, in HR, in cultural integration, and meeting people from different places and having a great time while you're at it. So as part of that, I was really involved in Canada, and then had the opportunity to work with the national team out in Spain for a year. So got to move to Madrid to work on this organization there.
Madrid is a beautiful city. To me, it's kind of like if the Spanish might not like this, but it's a compliment. It's as if Spain wanted to mimic Paris on a slightly smaller scale. I felt that like a lot of the architecture really paralleled Paris.
Yeah. It's a great city to live in. Like everybody loves Barcelona, I think as a tourist is fantastic, but it was such an incredible city to live in.
Did um did you have any culture shock
Mhm.
living in Spain? Like, 'cause, I mean, you were in India, and I mean, you'd moved around in Canada as well too. So when you get to Spain, like you said, you're already saying yes, there was culture shock, but was there as much moving over there?
Yeah, so the language barrier was quite real.
Well, good point. Yeah, Spanish.
Yeah, and like it's funny, right? I took 4 semesters of Spanish in university and I was like, I'll be fine.
Oh no.
Absolutely not true. Um, it's interesting because a lot of Spaniards learn English, but it's non-progressive English. So you're in English classes every year of school, but they're not necessarily increasing in competency because the language isn't moving with you.
Mhm.
So there are folks that speak beautiful, incredible English, but they've had to either learn it on their own, they learn it through like movies, consuming English media, things like that. So I had to work bilingually as well. So it was a crash course on having to learn Spanish and write in Spanish, or at least being able to communicate. I think a big learning for me was I had to drop the perfectionism because the goal wasn't to speak perfect Spanish. The goal was to be able to communicate with people. And so that was a big learning. There's a big learning in terms of how the Spaniards kind of live their life. I feel like up until that point,
Yes.
I called myself like an A plus plus personality, right? Like it's not just an A type. I was an A plus plus, right? I was volunteering, I was working, I was in university, I was go getting, I was, you know, always busy doing something, and living there gave me this appreciation to like stop and enjoy life. The first couple of weeks that we were there, we'd have these like big team dinners. So we were a team of I think 6 to 8, and we all lived in the same flat. We all worked together. Like it was kind of that like dorm camaraderie, and we used to have these big dinners. And then after dinner was done, everybody would just sit around and talk for a while. And I was like, okay, but don't we have to like get up and clean the dishes and put things away and whatever? And they're like, no, they have this concept called sobremesa, which literally translates to around the table. And the idea is you have a meal and then you just sit and shoot the shit. You just talk, you just enjoy. There's no agenda, there's no running away. You just enjoy the moment, enjoy the people that you're with. And so that was the perfect analogy of and learning for me of, okay, yeah, life is busy, you can do a lot of things, but how do you also enjoy those moments, savor those moments, and sometimes just sit around the table and hear the story and crack the joke and do different things that way. So that was a big learning for me. um and then for me in a work setting, what was a big learning was, all of us in that team, only two of them were Spanish, the rest of us represented different countries. So
Okay.
from Chile, Mexico, Costa Rica, Australia, Italy, me, and the 2 Spaniards. Um, and so for us as internationals coming in, we had all worked with the organization in our countries. So we come in guns ablaze and we're like, this worked in our countries, in our cities, it'll work here. Didn't work, right? This thing where let's do this, and this, no problem. It didn't work. What we were trying to do was kind of force a playbook, as it were, into a cultural setting, onto a society, onto a way of living and being as a population, and it didn't work. It was like hitting, you know, rocks at the wall. They just didn't even bounce back. They just fell flat completely on the floor. What we realized is that we needed to have a better understanding of the culture, the customs, the norm, the people behavior, so we could adapt the global playbook for what was needed there. And when we did that, it was this, I still remember that conversation. We're all sitting around the living room and we had this huge light bulb moment of we are force feeding this. It was like square and a round peg or whatever that analogy is. And we were like, it's not about changing the peg, it's about adapting the playbook to fit into the round peg, so that it could go through. And when we had that light bulb, maybe too late in our term there, but when we had that light bulb, it was a really, really big unlock. And it's something I've carried with me career-wise as well of, yeah, just can't throw things at the wall and hope that they stick.
When you realize they don't stick, do you still kind of do that on purpose, knowing it's not gonna stick just to see how people react so you can kind of rebuild that playbook you said or rewrite it from the ground up?
Yeah, I think a big element of this is experimentation, right? You're not gonna
Yes,
look
great
perfect
point.
at it because you're also not of, in that case, we're not of the culture, right? We're not Spaniards. We didn't grow up there, live there. And so, yeah, sometimes you have to experiment. Sometimes you have to iterate. Sometimes you have to push the boundaries of somebody to even see if they're have the propensity for change and to open up, right? So it it's maybe meeting a little bit more in the middle, than just like seeing if they stick. But yeah, I think that experimentation, that iteration is what's going to be crucial because it's understanding the playbook has to be unique for that community or that setting.
Okay, so going back to you integrating as someone new into Spain, you're
Mm,
in Madrid,
mhm,
and We know that you work for one of the most successful sports sponsorship company, award-winning sponsorship companies, full stack sponsorship companies in North America. I imagine you had to pick a football team.
I mean, the irony is I'm the non-sports person that works at this
What?
agency.
Oh no, that's
I
half the
I
fun of integrating is picking a team and starting from scratch.
I mean, so what was really cool, well, one, I usually just say hashtag sports and my eyes glaze over when people start with talking about sports. Um, but when I was there, was in 2010 when it was World Cup and Spain was on their run. So I was like a
Yes. Oh god, you
Spain.
had to have jumped on that bandwagon.
And the really unfortunate thing was that my ticket back home was right before the finals, and so I literally
Oh.
missed being in Madrid when they won, but Facebook was a thing, and so all my friends are, like, tagging me in the videos on Facebook, but yeah, so I always have a soft spot for, Spain in a Euro Cup or a World Cup setting.
Well, they're a good team to back, even though they're in a bit of a rebuilding phase. But moving on from Spain, you continued
Right,
you
sports, yes.
hashtag sports. You continued Isaac, and you returned to India this time,
Mhm.
and you had a different role as a brand manager. So take us through what it was like. Actually, a couple of things to unpack there. One was what was it like shifting roles to brand manager for the company for Isaac in India? Because I guess right now you're rebuilding the playbook, and if I have to imagine, the playbook would be like something a little bit more global, but every chapter would be maybe a different market in the world or a different country. So how did you have to adapt for India? And then coming back to India, I guess at this point you're probably what gone for about you coming back after 12, 13, 14 years. How much more different was the country at this point? Like, did you recognize it?
Yeah, great question. So, when I went to India and worked in Hyderabad, I was actually working on one of our global conferences. So instead of working on the chapter or the national organization, they were hosting. So they host this global conference in different countries every year, and it was in India. So that conference was about 1,000 people from 110 countries, and it's a 14-day conference.
Well, hold on. Did you say 14-day?
14-day conference.
That's like the Olympic Games.
That's kind of
It's
what it felt like. So we called ourselves we're an organizing committee, like you have at the Olympics. We're an OC. Yeah, it gets put together. So our committee was about 65 people from about 35 different countries. So that in itself was a not just working in India with Indians, you're also working with people from 35 different countries and around the world, even just to produce and put on this conference. Um, so interesting. Yeah, to your point, this had been 12 years since I'd been to India. I had not been back to India in that time. Leaving as a child, going back as a young adult, also very, very different as well. I had a very different experience than a lot of my coworkers. I had a similar experience to the other Indian American woman that was there as well. She was from New York. In that a lot of people were having these incredible experiences discovering India for the first time, right?
mm.
The food, the smells, the music, the clothing, the culture, the religions. I had all of that in my communities in Canada, right? In growing up with my family, extended family, my community, we had a lot of that. So when we went, some of that shine was gone a little bit because the business culture there is very specific. I think when we're in Canada, we learn about like foreign business customs. Like a lot of people will learn about like the Japanese, right? And oh, you have to accept a business card with two hands, right? That's like a
Oh, I didn't know that about them.
oh, there you go. But
Okay.
a lot of times people will use like Japan as something that's like a polar opposite in terms of business culture. But I think what we have to recognize is most business culture in other countries is different than where we're from, and so. Um, learning about Indian business culture in that kind of shock setting, you're just thrown into the deep end, is really, really fascinating. So, one example I'll give it, what's really famous is the Indian head nod. That's kind of this. It could mean yes, it could mean no. But
Okay, I didn't know about
yeah,
that,
you can
but
use an Indian head nod. But in a business setting, because it's a very culturally, we're very much a people of hospitality, right? And what that means is that we treat everybody kind of like a guest. And what that means is the guest is never wrong. And so, regardless of what sometimes somebody will think, especially as like a vendor or a supplier, they'll say, like, okay, no problem. And you're like, no, but I need that for like today at 3 p.m. They're like, okay, no problem. They're not going to get it to me at 3 p.m., but they're not going to tell me that they're not getting it for 3 p.m.
gotcha.
There's kind of this different way of interpreting what people are saying and how you negotiate. It's not as direct in communication. So that's something, you have to deal with. There's challenges with that, especially if you don't understand kind of what some of those culture shocks were. So I would say I didn't feel more Canadian than when I was in India.
From there you moved to was your next move PwC?
In London. Yeah.
Okay, before we get to that,
Yeah.
tell us how you found that job, because I think there's a very was it a networking moment where you discovered that specific job?
Yeah, so I actually found my role at PwC through ISEC. So because ISEC was a global internship program,
Okay.
internships was with PwC in London. So I was matched with that opportunity.
So am I getting ahead of things here? This wasn't at a wedding where
That was
someone
after, yeah,
that was after. Okay, so we'll get to that in a second. We just teed that up for everyone, so they're getting a bit of a teaser.
yeah.
Because I love stories like that, and we'll get to it, where it's kind of like, had you not bumped into that person, where would your life be right now? Like, we
Hmm.
always think about these big defining moments, but sometimes it's as simple as small talk turned into my next big opportunity. So, through Isaac, you end up at PwC in London. I imagine this probably wasn't your first time in the United Kingdom, but this is your first time working there. Have I got
It
that right?
first time in London.
Oh, it was your first time as
Mhm.
well, too.
Yeah, it was the first time I was there when I got off that plane with my two suitcases. Yeah.
Okay, so I know London by virtue of tube stations. That's how. Like, what was your closest tube station or tube line to your flat?
I was really close to London Bridge.
Oh, okay. So yeah, South
Yeah,
Central sort of ish.
yeah, so I was in a neighborhood called Kennington, not Kensington, but it was, not that far, from the Thames, and, like, my first, flat there, I could hear Big Ben from my, room, which was kinda cool. So I always lived in that kinda area because the PwC offices are also very famously, in that area as well. So Borough Market, I was very close to and went to all the time as well.
And what was life like for you in London? Like, did you adapt to it quite well? Did you find that it was kind of like, and I don't want to say there's a direct overlap between like Canadian culture and Indian culture, and maybe I'm stereotyping because both in India and London and England and the United Kingdom, they drive on the left, because that's the first thing I noticed with those countries. But did you find that those two cultures kind of blurred or overlapped a little bit there to a certain
No.
degree?
No,
Not
not
not at all? Okay, so
no,
just
no.
driving on the left is where it starts and stops.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. London was great because it was also, like, our mid-20s. We were all at our first kind of official corporate jobs. There were a ton of other interns, so I had a group of 15 to 20 friends always that we were all from different countries, working at different kind of placement internships, all in a similar stage of our lives, having a great time in the city, traveling around Europe. And I still have some friends, from that group that I'm still very much in touch with today. We're actually planning a reunion next year as well. And it was incredible. It was absolutely an incredible time. I mean, a lot of people have a great time after university, kind of in their mid-20s when they get that kind of taste of freedom. And that was the phase we were in. But it was also this like recent golden era in terms of London as well. It was during the London Olympics and leading up to it. The
Mm.
city itself had this really incredible energy. Lots of people were there for the games, organizing the games. There was a lot culturally happening in the city as well. So yeah, it was a great time to be there. This is
And did
Brexit, pre all of that. It was a great time to be there.
so did you have a local pub? You had to, if you didn't adopt a football team, you had to have adopted a local pub.
It was called The Black Prince, and it actually was
Oh,
it was
nice. That's a
actually in the movie The Kingsman. So I came back. I was living in Calgary.
Oh, geez.
Started
When
off
was it the 3rd one, the, Ray Fiennes one, or was it the 1st or the 2nd one?
first one where they have that big fight scene
Oh, "Manners maketh the man," and Colin Firth shuts the,
in the door.
locks them in. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, did you know that, or were you watching that film going, "Oh my god," or did you actually when you were there, were they filming it at that point?
No, because it came out, I think, a couple years later. So I was in the movie theater in Calgary watching this, and I had this like, "Oh my god, that was my local pub." And, like, that was the neighborhood I lived in when they did the little car chase.
Oh, geez. Was it also part of the neighborhood too when they did not just the car chase, but it was kind of like a parkour one where Eggsy is, like, literally jumping off buildings and running down ramps
I mean,
through the
some of that
townhomes there?
like, that I was trying to figure out if that was or not. I think part of it was, but part of it wasn't. But, yeah, I was like, "Oh, yeah, no." So pretty much Eggsy and I used to be neighbors. Is kind of
Well, I mean, if you've have you made it back to the Black Prince since?
I tried to go. I've only been to London again back in 2016. I went for a friend's wedding. I tried to go for a Sunday roast, which is really famous in the UK. But they actually had really incredible food, which is also why we were there all the time. And they were completely booked, so I have not been back.
I'm curious as to whether or not they have kind of played up that moment where, like, maybe they've got photos on the wall because that's something a lot of the pubs do. If something big happens in the neighborhood, they take a photo of it, put it on the wall, and make it seem like it's theirs,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they had a hand in it.
yeah.
Okay, so from London, though, kind of a bit of a homecoming. You come back to Canada, like you mentioned, your formative years were in Edmonton, but you come back to Calgary. We've already spoken about it high level. Where did the opportunity to stay with PwC and then take a role in Calgary come from?
Yeah, so when my internship was coming to a close, the visa is starting to expire. I start looking for different opportunities, and happened to see that PwC was also hiring for a role that was appealing. So reached out to them, chatted with them. Still had to do an interview, but of course it was a big appeal. Having worked at PwC in London and on a global level, so it kind of worked out, and was able to kind of seamlessly transition into a role there. Of course, the firm itself is different in different countries as well, but having an understanding of the brand, the writing, especially because I was in a communications role, it was just a great opportunity. So I think part of it was serendipitous that there was a role that was open, and then it worked out that I could fill that role and get hired in the Canadian firm.
Now, how did things change working for PwC in London versus working for PwC in Calgary? You had already mentioned when you were with Isaac, you got to Spain and you realized that the playbook you had wasn't going to work on a local level. Did you find that some of even though the work you were doing was different and the clients you were doing were localized to Calgary, did you find that certain things in London did transfer over within the company or maybe they didn't?
You know, it didn't. So I was in a
Interesting. Okay.
I was in internal global comms role in London where PwC had just launched their brand. There was a lot more maybe strictness or like we have to follow the brand, we have to do this because the proximity to the global teams was also closer. The further I got away to it into the local market, they're like, yeah, that's okay. That's what they said at global. We don't care. This is what works here. So it was a little bit more cowboy culture, a little bit more like, yeah, that's all guidance. It's not strict, it's not mandatory, so it was a little bit more, I think, of an appreciation of being able to play in the local market to what would work there. So I was in a role that was actually marketing and doing PR and communicating the firm itself versus having clients. So it was an interesting shift.
Did that play to your strengths though? The fact that the local company or the local office was like, that's guidance. We really get to do our own thing. And like you said, you get to be cowboys,
Mhm.
cowboys and cowgirls, I guess, kind of the Wild West,
Yeah.
pun intended a little bit. So that probably played. Does that play to your strengths, knowing that instead of being given guardrails, you're the one that has to define them?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's where I started to really like enjoy that a little bit more of like, yeah, I can have a sandbox, but the sand is still going to spill over the boundaries that exist there. I still didn't really get to embrace that autonomy until much later, but I think that was also one of the big appeals of agency as well is that you could be creative in different aspects, right? Like creativity doesn't just mean you're great at Photoshop, right? Or you're great at painting. Creativity is also in the problems that you get to solve for clients. And so that shift into agency, was really jarring in the beginning. And I would say the learning curve was significant. But after that 6 to 8 month period, when I started to feel really comfortable, is when I felt like my mind also opened up in a different way, where I could actually work with people and solve problems and bring solutions and actually be a bit gutsy and push some of the boundaries. Because in a consultative mindset, that's actually where you can win, right? Versus following the rules of a corporation or following the rules that exist within a brand itself.
I want to touch on something you said there
Mhm.
because it's kind of close to a conversation I was having with someone a couple of weeks ago where you kind of all of a sudden have that moment where you're at a new job and you find your footing. Like certain insecurities just kind of evaporate. And for me, I've always found that someone will ask me a question and I will give them the answer rather than saying I have to get someone technical in to help with this, or even if I don't have to bring them in, I just have to go behind their back and say, hey, how would you handle this? I find that without even thinking, I will answer that. And then a couple seconds later, I'll be like, maybe things are starting to come my way. Do you find after those 8 months that you were having those moments too, where you were less reliant on your peers and you were way more independent within your role?
Yeah, I think for me, some of the nuances is that I had a couple of really tough seniors or bosses in my first 6 to 8 months that were there, and I think with some of those barriers shifting and being removed, I think that also opened up things in a really big way where I could maybe spread my wings a little bit more. I think I was feeling a bit clipped as well, and so I think it was a perfect convergence of having the confidence in the role, not having some of those clips or barriers in place. And then, that confidence being able to build because I was able to demonstrate value and feel that value appreciated as well.
You mentioned earlier on that part of the reason you went back to Western Canada or Alberta specifically was the energy boom at this time.
Yeah.
I imagine many of your clients or your focus at PwC Calgary was within the energy sector.
Hmm.
What
Yeah.
was it like working with energy clients, and just kind of give us a couple pointers as to what the different challenges they had that you were brought in to solve for them.
Yeah, so energy and the oil and gas industry is really fascinating because it is quite a technical industry. Like we often think about it as like, cool, I go to a gas station, I fill up my car, right, and that's about it. But when you're in the sector in Alberta and in Calgary, you really have to understand both the upstream, the downstream, the processing side of it, because when you're consulting in that space, it's not necessarily all what you get at the gas station. It's the full line that leads up before it, all the way from extraction, up in Fort McMurray. So it's quite a technical sector. There's, as you can imagine, a lot of policy, a lot of advocacy, a lot of Indigenous consultation, which, has a lot of challenges in itself, a lot of environmental issues, which have its challenges in itself, a constant battle between economic engine and kind of maybe ethical value things. So it's a really really complex industry as an industry, but also as an individual working within that industry as well. I had the benefit of Shell being one of my client that I worked on for a number of years, and it was one of those pieces where I had incredible clients as individuals who had a big propensity for change and innovation and doing things differently and kind of changing the status quo. So we got to cook, honestly. We got to experiment and innovate and try different things. But I had a client that was super open to it. And so we got to collaborate together on a lot of things, and get to collaborate and work on and innovate and push the boundaries together. And I think that's where a lot of agency client relationships, when you see the like award winning work, when you see the like, oh, I'm really jealous of that, that was really cool, in the back of your mind that's not coming because your client gave you that brief or the agency pushed the client to that space. It's because you were always collaborating, kind of innovating together. And so I was really lucky to have that. So I got to touch so many different things. I got to touch the Montreal Grand Prix before F1 documentaries and it blew up. Like we were working on it, you know,
For Drive to Survive.
right? We got to help launch Shell's first social media channels in Canada and run that, Shell's first influencer programs in Canada and launch that. We got to work on things like the Eco Marathon. We got to work on things like their first hydrogen station in Vancouver and opening that up. So there were really some really, really interesting things that we got to work on, because, again, we had a great team that was around us and a great client that wanted to, like I said, cook with us.
Do you think, and let me know if I'm getting a little too deep with this one. Do you think part of it has to do with the fact, and I think you already touched on it, was that there might be so many misconceptions about the energy sector that that's why Shell was so open to being collaborative with you guys, is that they knew that they really had to get to they had to get in front of a lot of the things that the public might be saying about them.
I mean, we were in a bit of a bubble though in Calgary, right? Because most people are pro energy because it's such a significant
Very good point. Yes.
economic driver, right? So it's hard for me to answer that, I think, in a fulsome way. I think for me, my big aha or observation was that the individual people that we worked with were the ones that had that mindset. It's a phrase that I don't know if you've heard of, entrepreneur.
I've
It's
heard of that. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
But
it's
give
like
us the definition, please.
yeah, it's that idea of like having this entrepreneurial mindset, but you work inside of a company. You don't own your own company, but you still have those qualities or those ways of working that's, wanting to push the boundaries, not always wanting to just do things the way that they have been done, that want to be strategic, that still have those kind of visionary qualities, but they work inside of an organization, and probably will always work inside of an organization. So I think we were lucky that we have this kind of perfect timing of a great team on our side, a great team on the client side, and that's what kind of brought some of those things together.
Was it during this time that you go to a wedding, you bump into someone, and then what happens next?
Yeah, so this is when I was at PwC still, and I went to a wedding with my sister. It was one of her friends. Met somebody at the wedding, Carrie. She's still a buddy, and she was working at Edelman at the time. And she's like, "Oh, you're interested in working at an agency?" And I'm like, "What's an agency? Don't know what you're talking about." Yeah, I was like, I didn't know at that time. We go for lunch. This is when Edelman was just a few years old in the Calgary market, but also when Edelman globally was shifting from being a single kind of PR shop, wanting to be a full service integrated organization. So it was also an opportunity where they were looking for talent that weren't from traditional PR backgrounds. So that's how I could kind of work my way in with my, varied background, project management expertise, etc. I had a huge learning curve. Do not get me wrong. In PR, in working in agency, working with clients for the first time, but it's somewhere where now I've been at agency for over 10 years. So I guess something stuck. But
And you moved up within the company as well. Actually, really, let's take a step back. Edelman, were you still in Calgary at that point, or did you come to Toronto
I
now?
was in Calgary.
You're still in Calgary, okay. So you move into a senior account manager role. How do your responsibilities change?
Yeah, so it was really unique. There was some, leadership changes that had happened on the account. And as one of the only people working on the Shell account at that time, I was thrown with a lot of opportunity. So, was able to rise to the challenge, build out a team around me. And so with that came two promotions to senior account manager and account director. And I think it was more a reflection of the work that had been done versus the role itself changing. It was something where kind of had to almost like grow up really fast in terms of that role because I had this client who was, it's great that she wants all of these changes, but you're like, oh God, we have to do all of these changes too and figure out how to kind of keep pace and even outpace at the same time. So I think it was more of a reflection of where I was versus something I had to step into.
And from here, you moved to national public relations in Toronto. So, one, how did you find the role, and what was the attraction to moving to Toronto?
Yeah, so, there was a point, I had a lot of really incredible friends in Calgary. I'd had a really great career-wise, milestone-wise with Edelman. But, I'd faced a significant amount of burnout and I was also thinking about what I wanted the next phase of my life to look like. And I realized that a lot of the opportunities, especially in our industry, were within oil and gas. And at that point, I wanted to see kind of what else was out there. And so I decided, and I actually was really missing London. I was missing that kind of big city energy and vibe, but where was I gonna get that in Canada? It was Toronto. So I made this decision. I wanted to move out to Toronto. And so I was proactively looking for roles before the move. I didn't want to come here and just kind of be job hunting. I wanted to have a role to anchor me there. And at this point, actually, a number of people from Edelman that had worked with really closely and respected had made the jump to national. And so there was an opportunity there, met with a few people, and they created a role there. So when I moved out to Toronto, I started on the account side, but after about I can't remember if it was about 6 months to a year, I actually moved into the strategy team at National, which is where I really had an aha and really learned so much, challenged myself. I had an incredible boss in Becca Young, and she kind of taught me everything I needed to know or everything that I know about from a strategy perspective, but was an incredible collaborator for me as well. So had a really incredible time there, just building up and working on strategic planning for clients from business perspective, campaign planning, brand strategy. So got to dabble in a lot of different places there as well.
Can you give us an idea of the different clients that you were working on? And did anything from your oil and gas experience working with those clients transfer over to the new client book of business you were working on?
Yeah, I think it gave me an appreciation and almost a muscle memory, to use your term, in regulated environments. So when I moved to national, that's also when the cannabis boom was happening. So I had a cannabis client, had to learn about that industry really, really quickly, because they were just moving from that kind of gray space into more of a regulated space. And so I kind of had that muscle memory of how to work in regulated environments and learn that.
Can we say a heavily regulated environment? I don't wanna say regulated because that really underplays or it really downplays exactly what you had to learn. I was speaking to someone else who worked, on a cannabis client, and he said basically you had to become your own sort of like cannabis advertising lawyer.
Yeah, absolutely. We knew that C45 inside and out. Like,
Nice.
we were referring to it all of the time, and we became almost like the enforcers of it within the interagency team as well. They would come to us about like, can we do this? Can we not? So we had a really good understanding of it. But then it also ranged. I got to work on, Giant Tiger. I got to work with some university-based clients. So dabble in kind of that public sector space. I also got to help rebrand the or not rebrand, sorry, build the brand for a brand new nonprofit organization called the Foundation for Black Communities. Got to work on things like TEDx Toronto. So the client roster varied significantly. SiriusXM, Keurig Dr. Pepper. So it kind of went from public sector, nonprofit. There was some tech clients in there, some pharma clients, some CPG, cannabis. I had a psilocybin client for a hot minute
Jeez.
as well. Yeah, so it really, really, varied and hit the gamut, I think, in terms of industry.
And I believe you closed out your career at National Public Relations as their VP of strategy, and I wanted to ask you, as you climb the ladder and you move into more of a leadership role, is it difficult for you to move to to go from being a player to a coach? And I say that because a lot of the fun stuff that we get into this business for happen usually at I don't want to say the lower levels, but usually not at the VP levels. You kind of remove yourself from a lot of those fun brainstorm sessions, the execution, and you find yourself managing people in spreadsheets. And
Yeah.
was that the case for you as well?
I think my roles have always been a dual of coach, but also having to roll your sleeves off and play a couple periods as well. Like, I'm really trying with the sports analogy
I
here.
was going to say, I was like, that was perfect. You just rolled right into that.
Have to I feel like it's, part of the gig now, but, I think dialing back to my Edelman days is when I started first managing people, but also having to do the work, and I think part of agency and not necessarily like, I've never worked at the big juggernaut agencies, like, even when I was at Edelman, it's a huge agency, but our team was always 15 people in Calgary, right? And so and I was a national in Toronto, big, but you were kind of contained within your team, so I always, like, from those times always had to play that dual role of manager, of coach, of people development, while also have to rolling up your sleeves and do the slides. And I would say that's until today. Like, even today, you're, in the role that I have now. Yeah, sure. I'm doing people stuff. I'm doing business strategy. I'm also writing the slides and I'm doing the
Okay.
presentations and, writing the RFP document, which is, may or may not be what I'm doing after this recording. But it's kind of but I think it's good though, because I think the people that are so removed from the day-to-day of the business, going back to that analogy that we had before of understanding the community and the culture, if you're so removed from it, you can't also adapt and grow it and create that friction and evolve and iterate it because it becomes theory. But when you're in the day-to-day of the business, when you're actually physically doing the work kind of side by side with your team members, that's when you can really affect the change that you want to make from a strategy perspective or a culture change perspective.
And also, too, what you brought up, things like writing the RFPs and delivering the presentations. What's expected from an RFP and a presentation changes as well. So it's not like, you know what, I did this 10 years ago. I've already ticked that box. It's not like you can just kind of slide back into it like it's riding a bicycle. And I've seen that. I work on the sales side of the business and media and ad tech. And I've seen it where people will get out of sales and you're trying to explain to them that things have changed, not that things have changed, but this is the way it goes. And unless they get themselves into a player coach role, it's difficult for them to be empathetic to what you're saying because they're not getting that feedback from clients because they don't have any direct clients anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, with the way that work is going, the pace of work is not going to slow down. The rate of technology change is not going to slow down. I kind of think that the most successful executive C-suite leaders are going to be the ones that can actually be adaptable and jump in and out. And I really think that a lot of, especially agency structures, are going to just continue to flatten because clients are also demanding more senior experience and you can't be out of touch, right? You have to
Hmm.
be in the business. I think that's twofold. You're going to see younger leaders coming into the fold, like a lot of our leadership team, and myself included, but you're also going to see a lot of senior people that are in the work, that are rolling up their sleeves, that are, writing the pitches and delivering them too. And, sometimes like on our client right now, I'm playing the role of creative producer because that's just what needs to be done. And that's okay. It's fun. And it's great to kind of ebb and flow and morph into different roles. But I think that's what's going to happen. I think these traditional structures are really going to go away because the pace of change and the pace of work and the pace of technology is not going to support rigid hierarchical structure.
I couldn't agree more. And the other thing too that we don't talk about enough is that people have got to be willing to learn these take up these new skills or even these new platforms as well. I get a chance to lecture every once in a while at colleges. And I always say to people, I'm like, oh, you're a couple of weeks out from graduation. They're all like, yeah, we're done with school. And I'm like, if you think you're done with learning, you're dead. I'm like, middle management's maybe the best you're going to get if you're lucky. And I tell them, I go, fortune isn't going to necessarily favor the bold. It's going to favor those who understand that they've got gaps and are willing to take it upon themselves to fill it. It could be taking a course and paying out of your own pocket, or sitting down and going, you know what? There's a YouTube video that teaches me how to use ChatGPT or to come up with the prompts. I'm not going to get a certification for it, can't put it on my LinkedIn profile, but at least it's going to make me a better employee. And then I should be able to grow from there.
It's such a incredibly humbling moment when we've all had that realization that the paper doesn't matter, the degree, the certification, it doesn't matter. In what we do, at least, it's learning on the job. It's a propensity to understand those gaps and try and fill them. But like, I took 2 marketing classes at university. My degree is not in marketing, right? It's in international business and strategy. And it's like somehow I'm leading a marketing agency, right? Because I was interested in, willing to learn it and on the job and not, right? And so I completely agree with you.
To paraphrase Barack Obama, best piece of advice he'd ever given in a speech was, be easy to work with and get stuff done. That's it. If you can tick those 2 boxes, sky's the limit for your career.
Absolutely. Our kind of mantra, my co-lead at T1, Liz Rose, and I, we always say we say 2 things all the time for perspective is we want to do cool work with cool people, make our money and go home. It's not that serious. And then the other side is like, we're not saving babies, we're saving PDFs, not our careers. We saw it somewhere else. But it's so accurate. It's just perspective of like nothing is that serious. Like we're talking about candy and toys and you know what I mean? And hot dogs. Like we can all do great work. We can all have fun in doing it. But it's been a really big focus for us of how do we bring the joy back to work? Because the world is very serious. Our personal lives are very hard sometimes. Work doesn't also have to add to that. Let's find the joy in that.
Yes. Okay, so let's bring things full circle. So your move to T1, because it started first with was this kind of a subsection, the MH3 Collective? Have I got it correct? Or
Yes, our founder, Mark Harrison, during the pandemic, as people were slowing down and trying to figure things out, he decided to create a bunch of ventures. So T1 was started in '94, but during COVID, he co-founded an ad agency called Humanity, a nonprofit called the Black Talent Initiative, and a nonprofit called Park Street Education. So MH3 Collective kind of became this umbrella organization that was the red thread that kind of connected all of these ventures together. And so when I was first hired, I was among a group of incredible women, Bonnie, Nora, Rosie, and myself. We were 4, and we were almost like we were internal consultants. We were responsible for accelerating these net new organizations that had been created of like, oh, great, these are an idea. How do we operationalize them? And on the other side was to help pivot and transform our kind of legacy organizations through COVID and through the pandemic themselves. After coming out of the pandemic, we realized, oh, we could probably do this for clients too and make some money doing it. So we started an organization called Sidekick, which is a strategic consultancy within it. One of the roles within Sidekick was also doing fractional leadership. And so that's how I first came into T1. I was kind of, doing some brand strategy over here. I was doing a Marcom plan for Park Street. I was working on a transformation strategy for T1. An opportunity came in as a fractional leader for T1, stepped into that, realized I liked it, kind of didn't leave the fractional role, kind of became the more permanent
nice.
role, and the sidekick role became a little bit more fragmented out. But we're this community of organizations. We lovingly call them our sister agencies, our sister organizations. We work together on a number of projects as well, but came in that context and then kind of fell into this role at T1, and they didn't kick me out so yet. So I kind of have been holding on, but enjoying it and trying to do the best I can with it.
I want to talk about the growth you've experienced within the different companies you've been at, and then we'll also touch on it at T1 as well. We can put it into whatever context you want. Question I always ask my guests anytime they've seen significant growth within a company is, how do you go about doing it? Like if someone were to say to you, hey Nithya, I really want to move up in my company. I don't want to go elsewhere. I like what I'm doing. I see myself here for like 5 to 7 years, but I don't want to be doing the exact same thing. How do I position myself for promotion? Like what would be the first step?
Ooh, great question. So a lot of times with the folks that I manage, I usually do like a gap analysis with them. So I say, okay, what's your role right now? And I pull it down to like job descriptions or advancement guidelines or something like that. Like, what's the job description you have now? What's the job description you're looking for? Right? Where's the gap? And I'll usually get them to list out like 3 to 5 examples of every single thing that they've done. Because essentially what I'm trying to tell them is let's build the business case to get you there. It's also a very humbling exercise for the person that wants to grow because oftentimes they might think they're further ahead than they are. So by doing that gap analysis, I'll be like, give me 3 to 5 examples of each one of these bullet points. They can do that. I'm like, oh gosh, we should work on getting you promoted right away. Or, okay, let's find the opportunities where you can demonstrate that, excel that, practice that, learn that to get to the next level. So that's kind of a tried and trusted tool that I usually use to help people kind of map out what that career progression looks like. By doing that analysis, we can also figure out, okay, is this a 2 month thing? Is this a 2 year thing to get there? Right. So it's usually one of my tools that I pull out in order to do that. The two other pieces that I really, tools, I guess, that I use are one, how do you cultivate a growth mindset? Because it's not also just like checking a box on a project. It's also that mindset of finding those opportunities in the micro moments and that conversation with a colleague or a client to how do I get staffed on a larger project where I can demonstrate
Mm.
this. So I think that growth mindset is important. It also takes you out of yourself. It's not just about you growing, because then if you understand if my team grows, if my client grows, if my agency grows, then I have more opportunity for growth as well. So I find cultivating that growth mindset a really good way to catalyze that kind of upward progression or progression within an organization. And then the third one that I do a lot, and it's a tool, is coming up with your professional story. If you wanted to, and it could be as simple as rewriting your bio. It could be as, simple as like, what do I want my LinkedIn profile to be? It could be as a manifestation of where you want to go, but it's writing it within your own voice of how do you want people to talk about you? Right. And it's not today, maybe it's in the 2 months or the 2 year period, but what do you want that to be? What is that writing exercise that you can do that kind of envisions where you want to be, right? And that's everything from adjectives about your personality, that could be about how you approach the work itself. It could be on the types of clients that you write, but or work on, but it's not meant to be like a resume or a capture of the resume. It's more meant to be of how do you want to be seen as a leader? Because especially if you're trying to go up in an organization, it's usually in a leadership role. How do you want to be seen as a leader? How do you want that approach to be recognized as well? So that exercise is something that I often do as well with folks that I manage.
Nithya, I asked this question to a number of people, and that is single-handedly the most thorough answer I have ever received. Like this section right here is going to get its own cut down onto YouTube. And
Hey,
anytime someone's just kind of like, "How do I get a promotion?" I'm sending them the link to it. I'm like, just watch this.
can you tell I'm
Okay.
a strategist that literally thinks in PowerPoint slides? Because I'm like, here's
Oh,
a reset plan for.
when you said gap analysis, I was like, "Ooh, this is wonderful." Okay,
Thank you.
so we're going to be bringing it home soon and jumping into rapid fire questions. But Nithya, if anyone wants to get in touch with you to learn more about what T1 does and what they're up to, what's the best way they can reach you?
Yeah, I mean, we got a fun website called the T1agency.com. So you can check us out there. T1, the number one, not spelt out. You can find me on LinkedIn. Hit the follow button. I usually post a lot of musings there. And then we also produce a really great conference called Sponsorship X. So we have an edition coming up in November. So come check out the conference as well. But yeah, I guess find us on the internet is the best way to say it.
Find you on the internet. Does Sponsorship X have its own website, or is it part of the T1 site?
ayahuasca.com. Also a great way to find us. Lots of thought leadership there if you're interested about the sponsorship industry. And we honestly throw really cool events. Next one will be tied with the Northern Super League finals. So that'll be a really fun one too.
Oh, nice. Okay. Bit of soccer happening right there. So, look, Nithya, this has been a wonderful chat. Okay, so let's bring this home with rapid fire questions. First one always, the
Yeah.
campaign you're most proud of.
Ooh, Grand Prix. First Grand Prix, second Grand Prix program I did in 2018, I would say.
Your favorite movie.
I can't answer that question because I love movies, so many movies. I would say some of the classics though that I love that I grew up on are like Speed, Independence Day, Armageddon. Really,
Oh, 90s action
yeah,
films. Thank you.
absolutely the
Oh,
that I love.
oh, oh,
Absolutely.
we're if we're gonna blow something up. And I know it's a tasteless thing to
Michael
say.
Bay,
They're just gonna blow something up.
Bad Boys.
Yes.
Oh, Bad Boys.
Bad Boys.
CGI and it
Bad
was real
e-
explosions.
everything was
Anytime it's
filmed
on
in camera.
TV, yeah, every time it's on TV, I will watch it every single time. Yep.
Oh, it's funny because I ask everyone what their favorite movie is, and also at the same time what their favorite campaign is, or the campaign they're most proud of. And they usually treat the campaign they're most proud of as their favorite child, where they were like, I can't answer that. And although funny thing too about movies though is that people sometimes are very hesitant. They feel like they have to say something that's, very Art Nouveau or whatever. And I'm just like, no, no, no. They're like, you can tell they want to say Mean Girls, but they're like, they will judge me if I say Mean Girls. It's like, no, no, this is part of it. But look, staying on the theme of movies, though, if Hollywood were to make a movie based on your life story, who would you want to play you?
I mean, the first person that came to my mind was Taraji P. Henson, just because I absolutely love her, but I love her range too. She like plays the funny character. She's played like the boss character. She's played the dramatic ones too. So I was like, yeah, I think that would be great. I mean, she doesn't look like me, but she is very gorgeous, and I feel like people always pick actors and actresses that are looking than they are. So I'm going with that.
Okay, so my follow up to that, if Hollywood were to make this movie, what would you call it?
Okay, so I asked the group chat this question because I
Oh,
thought that
nice.
I know, because
Okay.
I'm like, listen, we got to get the group chat involved with this, right? It's a good one. So one of the suggestions was instead of eat, pray, love, it was eat, slay, love. Then from
Nice.
because I'm a foodie too, so I was like, oh, that one was a good one. So I really enjoyed that one. Um, Also, somebody said that I should choose Simone Ashley or Lauren Hill. But life lessons and leaving it all on the dance floor was one suggestion for a movie, or a meditation on lyrics and leadership in a modern world. Also, love that as a love of music and dance and whatnot and leadership. So that's what the group chat provided.
I've never had anyone answer any of these questions by committee. That's wonderful.
I mean, it was either going to be that or Chat GPT, so I the group chat instead of Chat.
Jeez. Your favorite book?
I can't answer that either. I really loved The Power of One growing up. It was a book based in South Africa about this kid that was bullied and became this boxer called PK. So that book was one that I read a few times. But yeah, I like reading, but favorite book is a tough one for sure.
Your favorite song?
I can't answer that. I'm too much of
And
a
answer
music
that.
person.
Okay.
I'm too much of a music person, so it's like favorite song of the day, the week, the month, the era. I have favorite is too hard to quantify. If you ask me about food, it's the same answer.
All
Too
right.
much of a foodie, love all too much food to quantify that.
Okay. Well, how about this? The best advice you have ever received?
God, I don't I don't know what the answer to that question would be. The best advice I've ever received. I mean, I really love Instagram wisdom. Again, another thing that people wouldn't admit, but I'm like, we all share it. We all share those little word things. So, two things that I saw, actually, one that I saw recently that really has stuck with me this year, is that you might not be everybody's cup of tea. You might be ayahuasca.
Ooh, that's deep.
I loved it because I think a lot of like recovering people pleasers like myself, it's like acknowledging that you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea and that's okay. And for some people, especially in my role that is so friction based, I might be somebody's ayahuasca where they puke at first, but then they have this rahan even after. That's kind of what I'm going with. You know what I mean? Like sometimes I know I'm going to piss people off or rub people the wrong way or really challenge their way of thinking, but I'm hoping that leads to an epiphany after, or they just puke and they keep it pumping and they live their lives. And that's totally okay too. So I'm going with Instagram wisdom in the last year, something that's really stuck with me.
That's awesome. Okay. I don't know if we can top that answer. I feel like closing it off now, but we're going to keep going. So, if you could go back in time and give your younger self advice, what would you say?
Chill out, live life, enjoy. I think the epiphany that I had in Spain about just like changing gears and like enjoying life a little bit more, I would tell that to my younger self.
And my signature closing question, if you weren't in media and marketing, what would you be doing and why?
Um, I think there's a lot for me in the multiverse. I think there's a version of me that's a doctor because I was the good little Indian daughter that went and did it, or a lawyer or an engineer. I think there's the version of me that is some sort of like creative artist type boho, like living in a loft somewhere. I think there's a version of me that's a diplomat. I think there's a version of me that's a bus driver and just loves saying hi to people every day and everything in between. And I think there's multitudes to people and kind of just go with the flow of it.
That feels like such an ayahuasca infused answer. It does.
I'm on a
It
theme
does.
right now.
It absolutely. Look, we're going to end things right there. Nithya, this has been an absolute blast. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you for inviting me, Victor. I had a lot of fun. Thank you.